Today's video is on the classification of living things notes. For this video today, you're going to want your white note packet out in front of you and open to the classification of living things section. If at any point during the video you feel like I'm going too fast or you need some more time to write down what I'm saying, please pause the video and then start it when you're ready to go again. So we learned already what it means to be alive. We talked about some different characteristics that all living things share. Well, when scientists then look at all of those living things, they need to find a way to order them so that they can better talk about them and study them. So they need to find a way to put them in kind of categories. And so we're going to call that putting into categories the classification of living things. So for example, you can see we've got a bunch of different living things here: an orangutan, a macaw, a mushroom, an octopus. We got even some little bacteria cells down here and a big cactus. All of these things are alive. And yet when we look at them, they have very different characteristics from each other. A cactus can't fly, right? And an orangutan itself can't make you sick like a bacteria can. Okay? So scientists needed to find a way to put these all into different groups. And so they do that through a system called classification. To classify something is to just put something into groups based on similarities. Many of you probably did this growing up with Halloween candy, right? Like, I know that when I was growing up with Halloween candy, I always loved the fruity Halloween candy, the Starbursts, the Sour Patch Kids. So I would put those in its own pile, and then I wasn't so keen on the chocolate, so those would go in their own separate pile. Classifying, okay? The science of classifying is called taxonomy. This is where scientists name, describe, and classify the organism. So first they look at an organism and they decide which group it's going to go into. Does it have the wings? Does it have like special fur color? Does it act like these other ones? Then they describe what it looks like and give it a name. So that is the science of taxonomy. And we're going to get into some of the specifics of what that looks like today. So why does a scientist classify? Well, they classify because it's useful for us when we want to study them. Okay, they show similar characteristics that different organisms have with each other. And by organisms, I just mean different living things, right? Like animals or plants or bacteria or fungi. And it makes life easier when we're talking about it, especially when we're talking to people who speak another language. In science, we use a common language so that we can better understand organisms when we classify them. So when we classify, or when a scientist classifies, they're trying to answer three questions. One, how many known species are there? Okay, how many known total organisms or species are there in the world? What are the defining characteristics of each species? How is each species special or different from other species? And then what are those relationships between species? How are they related to each other? Okay. How are they different from each other? Like, we know that like a typical house cat that you have at home is related to like wild cats that you would find out in nature, like a lion or a tiger or a bobcat. But how are they related to each other? Taxonomy helps us answer that question. So the modern classification system, what system do we use? Our system is completely based off of characteristics that organisms share with each other. And we go from big, broad characteristics all the way down to really small, specific characteristics through different levels. So we start here at the domain, which is some of the biggest, broadest, most common characteristics, and we work our way down to the species level, which are some of the most specific characteristics or differences between organisms. So when we talk about these levels, the domain is the biggest one. And within the domain, there are three major groups: eukarya, bacteria, and archaea. We belong to the group eukarya. Bacteria and archaea both contain bacteria, but there's a slight difference between the two of those that we'll talk about later. Underneath that domain level, then, we come to the kingdom level. There are 6 total kingdoms: Animalia, which has the animals, plantae, which has the plants, fungi, which has the funguses, protista, which kind of has everything else, the protists, eubacteria, or true bacteria, and archaeobacteria. And those are kind of the 6 kingdoms. They live underneath the domains. So in like the domain Eukarya, Animalia, Plantae, Fungi, and Protista are 4 kingdoms that are under that group. Okay. Going down then, underneath kingdom, we have phylum, and then class, and then order, and then family, and then genus, and then species. The smallest group. They share the most characteristics. As we move down this list, the group gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until we get to almost nothing. Now, you're going to need to remember all of these, and you're going to need to remember them in order. So I'm going to give you a mnemonic device, kind of like King Henry when we were talking about metric conversions. So starting up a domain, the biggest one, we're going to use the device or little saying that says, do kings play chess on funny green spaces? Do is domain, kings for kingdom, play for phylum, chess for class, O for order, F for family, green for genus, spaces for species. If you can remember that and memorize that, you're going to hopefully be able to remember that all of those in order, going from the biggest down to the smallest, the most broad to the most specific. We can think about this another way too. This model right here kind of shows what it would look like if we were talking about like a city or a place. So the domain for any living thing would kind of be like the solar system, right? The solar system is the biggest, most broadest way we can talk about space, okay? If I want to get more specific of that, moving down, I could go to a kingdom. Like for this one, it's Animalia. If again, I was talking about space, one part of space is like Earth. One planet within the solar system is Earth. Going down even further, a phylum, which is smaller than a kingdom, okay, would be like the phylum Chordata. For Earth, a smaller part of Earth is a continent, like North America. As we move further down then within the phylum, going down to class, okay, that is like the class Mammalia. In North America, a smaller part of North America is one country, the United States. We get rid of Canada and Mexico. Moving down farther from class to order, we go from the country of the United States to one state, Minnesota. Going down from order to family, we go from Minnesota to one region of Minnesota, the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. Then going from family down to genus, we go to one part of the Minneapolis-St. Paul region, which would be Scott County. Scott County could be part of that. And then going down from Scott County, from genus, we go into the species. Going down from Scott County, a smaller part of Scott County is New Prague, the city. So you can see we go from a really broad range at the top in domain, all the way to a really small specific spot down by the species. Here's another example of this. The kingdom Animalia, these would also all fall underneath the domain Eukarya. So they're under the big broad domain Eukarya. They're in the kingdom Animalia. All of these are considered animals. But then when we go down to the phylum Chordata, which means they have a hollow backbone, we have to get rid of this bug. This insect does not fit under Chordata because it has an exoskeleton. It does not have a hollow nerve cord. Okay? Then when we go down to the class, even more specific, the class Mammalia, we have to get rid of anything that's not a mammal. So the blue jay, a bird, is not a mammal. Okay? They don't nurse their young with milk. Okay? They feed their young worms. Okay? So we get to an even smaller subset. Within the class Mammalia, then there's an order, the carnivores. The carnivores have special teeth for tearing meat. Okay? Lions, bobcats, bears, cats, they all have those. We as humans don't have those special teeth. We are not carnivores. We're omnivores. We eat both meat and fruits and vegetables. Okay? Then within the carnivores, there's a special family, okay, of cats, the feline, Felidae. Okay? Well, we have to get rid of the bears because a bear is not a feline. It doesn't have these retractable claws. Okay? Within that family of felines, there is a genus called Felis. These are types of cats that can't roar. So we had to get rid of a lion because a lion can roar. The cat and the bobcat cannot. Then the species, remember this is the most specific level, we are just left with the domesticated house cat. And the name for that would be Felis domesticus. And no matter where I say that on earth, whether I say it in the United States or Japan, it's going to mean the same thing. That's the great thing about how this is all named. It all means the same thing everywhere you go. Here's just another example. You can see moving from domain all the way down to species, the different ways we organize this and get more specific. We talked about a cat before. Here's us. We are under the class Eukarya. We're pretty similar to the cat until we get to the order where we are part of the primate order. All the way down for us for species, you're going to see a name that you're probably familiar with, Homo sapiens. Notice that the first word of Homo sapiens actually comes from the genus. And that's going to come into the naming that we're going to talk about now. So scientific names. Scientific names are used to help avoid confusion. We do not speak the same language that they speak in Russia. We don't speak the same language that they speak in most of South America. And so to avoid this type of confusion, because our word for crab is going to be a different word than it is in Russia or Brazil or France. So to avoid this confusion, scientists came up with a system of naming to communicate more effectively. And this system is based off of the languages Greek and Latin. Okay? And so when we use it, it's the same everywhere you go. So in this scientific naming system, this two-word naming system, also called binomial nomenclature, there's going to be two words in the name. The first word is going to be the genus name, and that is typically capitalized. The second word, that is the species name. It is a lowercase, normally. So for example, we could see here for humans, we are from the genus Homo and the species Sapien. So our scientific name would be Homo sapiens. For the tigers, they come from the genus Felis and the species Tigris. So they are Felis tigris. Okay. Notice how the first word is capitalized, the genus. The second word is lowercase. That's typical of the binomial nomenclature or two-word naming system. Typically, these names are either italicized when they are typed or underlined when you write them out. Like I said before, they're based on the languages of Greek and Latin, and they frequently tell us something about the organism. So for example, Australius migratorius. This is a bird that migrates in Australia. Scientists are really creative, you guys. They make up super creative names. They're actually not. They're really literal. Okay. There's also this fungus here that was named Spongiforma squarepantsi, named after SpongeBob SquarePants. Can you see the resemblance? Okay. So this often tells us something about the organism that we're looking at. We've covered a lot of information today. We have covered the different, what taxonomy is and classification, why scientists classify. We have covered the different levels of classification, going from the domain all the way down to the species level. And we've talked about the different ways that scientists name or come up with scientific naming. Now you are going to go to BrainPop and watch the classification video. Please listen to your teacher for further directions on how they would like you, what they would like you to do with BrainPop.